Hi, my name's Joel Duff, and I just started this recording, and I really have no idea what I'm going to say. I just got done with recording 45 minutes of me rambling, talking about young Earth creationism, trying to wrap up my blog series that I just produced on what I call the new creationist or the state of creationism. Every couple of years I talk about, just sort of like assess the lay of the land. What's going on in young Earth creationism? I spend so much time watching, watching videos, reading various blogs, reading various books, watching the different young Earth creationist organizations and what they're saying and doing and following Ken Ham. It's really it is a huge time commitment. But I feel like it's really important to be like right on top of exactly what's happening so I can feel like I'm accurate when I talk to people about what's happening, because I get asked all the time. So I just, after finishing that blog series, which was an exercise for me to think about, what's going on in young Earth creation right now? What are the major forces that are shaping things? And the one force that I saw kind of coming together, and it's something that I talked about a couple years ago when that video Is Genesis History came out, is at the time I wrote, I said, I think this is going to be a really important film. It's seen by a lot of people, but it's more than just being seen by a lot of people. It was sort of the professionalism of it, but even more so, it was the individuals that were involved in it. It's kind of like a collection of, it's like a ragtag group of individuals, come together from around the universe, to form this force. Now, in a way, it kind of felt like that because, most things are done young Earth creationism are most things that happen in young Earth creationism are driven very much from, say, Answers in Genesis, specifically Ken Ham, right? You've got the Ark, encounter, and you've got the Creation Museum. You have all this homeschool material out there, and you have books, and you have all these speakers going out, and you have conferences, right? And Creation Ministries International, Institutes for Creation Research, they also are doing similar things. They have similar foci in terms of their outreach. I mean, Institute for Creation Research has opened their own, creation museum as an educational opportunity in their area, and that's a whole long story about how successful that's going to be and why. But so there's just a lot of things that these young Earth creationists, I call them the big three, right? Young Earth apologetics ministries or parachurch ministries that are out there. But they all have a similar rhetoric. I mean, if you read their material, they have a similar way of approaching how they're going to try to convince you that they're correct, and this is the correct interpretation of both science and of Scripture. And they have this approach that for many really works. In other words, they're using, I'll say they're using humanistic derived psychological techniques, that are very, very effective. I think you see that in the culture today. There's certain elements of culture, not just in the United States, but all over the world that dictators use that are very effective strategies at convincing people of things. Those things are shared as rhetorical devices among these different groups. And then, of course, they're using a lot of the same data and a lot of the same information, right? They all kind of sharing the same kind of findings and then resources and spreading the word of young Earth creationism in similar fashions. Now, that's not to say there aren't a lot of disagreements among the different ministries. They're different ministries for a reason, right? It's like, they have personality disagreements and so forth, but there's a lot of core similarities in their structure and their style. And so what I was saying is that in my blog series is that Is Genesis History kind of, grabbed a bunch of people that were kind of the eclectic outer fringes. But I don't really think they're the outer fringes. I think that rather than being the outer fringes, they're the ones that, and I've written about this as well in the past, that where real new ideas come from aren't often from these large organizations, which in a way become stuck in their own, they're trapped by their own history, right? And especially by their own leadership, right? If you have strong leadership, strong personality types who basically are have very strong messages like this is the truth, and they make it sound like everything they've ever learned or said is exactly, the way it is. It becomes very hard for them to learn and understand new things and maybe adapt and change, or I guess we could say evolve. It's very hard for them to evolve. Because they don't really have mutations. They stifle that very, very quickly. You have to have certain views, and if you dare question certain things, and I don't even mean central things. I mean sometimes questioning can just be small things, and yet progress isn't made. And some people are going to object to this. They're going to say, well, you can't have real progress, and you can't have real new ideas in young Earth creationism. You can't have real intellectual engagement because it's not an intellectual exercise. I don't want to talk about it like that. I want to say that there are young Earth creationists that are working at creation institutions, universities, right? They're professors, in which they're engaged in teaching and helping others. They're engaged in doing some research. They're thinking, right? And they've been trained to think about ideas. They're trained scientists. And so they have experienced being able to work with information and to be able to assess it. Now they're still working within we're working within the boundaries, right, of a young Earth creationist worldview and approach, and they're trying to manage the data they have from the world around them and find new ways of interpreting that data to support the young Earth creation enterprise. However, they are far more willing to acknowledge, when the data doesn't fit. All right, they're hoping to find better ways to make it fit, or maybe make new models that will make the data make sense, within young Earth creationism. But they aren't simply proclaiming everything points to a young Earth, or everything points to, the evolution is a bunch of garbage, and people who believe that are totally crazy and nuts. All right, because how could they see it? Because it's totally wrong. It's like, no, there are rational reasons why people believe the world is old. Right? There's reasons why people would look at the evidence and come to the conclusion the Earth is old, and that aspects of evolutionary biology are reasonable inferences from the world that we've observed. And so it's not at all, they're different in that sense. And there's a bunch of other independent creationist thinkers. In other words, they don't really fit into a form of ministry that very much is focused on appeasing the masses with easy answers to questions. Like, okay, we have the answers, right? They're much more able to handle not knowing, the answer, and saying where they don't know the answer. So this is one of the places where I said this is what to me makes the new creationist is their willingness to both talk, right, with others, not just themselves, the willingness to critique other young Earth creationists theologically and scientifically, their willingness to try out new ideas, right, even if other creationists might think they're heretical for those. They're hypotheses, all right? And they're saying test these hypotheses. To me, that's a refreshing approach. And what I like about that is that, and I'm sure this is, won't make Ken Ham and others happy, and maybe even the new creationists won't be happy with me, because it feels like, am I intentionally driving a wedge between these two groups of creationists, playing them off each other? No, I think I'm just trying to look at the world of creationism and say, like, there is this distinguishable set of creationists that have a different approach to creation apologetics. Anyway, I think of it as a kinder, gentler version of creationists. I just remembered where I was going with my previous thought, where I had lost my train of thought. I think of them as, okay, here's where the new creationists won't like what I have to say, but I think that this is the future of what will happen. I think this is the thing that Ken Ham and others are scared of with the new creationists, right? One of the reasons they're pushing back against some of them and some of their ideas. So yeah, I remembered where I was now with my previous thought. um, why would I'm not trying to create necessarily a wedge within young Earth creationism or saying that there is some sort of um, impossible divide there. I'm saying one group is sort of nested within the other, and it's a different approach. But here's the thing, and the reason why I'm going to say that I feel optimistic and I appreciate the approach of the new creationists, and I find their work uh, much more interesting to read and actually somewhat challenging at times, because I think they do recognize, they're willing to acknowledge difficulties in their own ideas and among other creationists. And so it makes it a much more interesting interaction because we can explore some space and have some mutual interest. Right. So, and discussion is almost impossible with the traditional creationists, right? It's us against them, compromisers, and so forth. All right. Hardly an acknowledgement that anyone else can even be a Christian if they don't accept, A, B, C, D, and E at all. So here's what I see happening that I think is a positive development. And I don't know how far it will go. I don't know how far the new creationists are going to go. I feel like there's some momentum there, and they could create a real change in creationism over the next decade. But they don't have the money, resources, and so forth that the other creation ministries have, and they can essentially be pushed out of the major out of the limelight, I guess you could say, out of the view of the common man. But the more that the common person sees the new creationist, the better I think that we all are off. The church is off, because my interest, my overall interest is not like who's right, who's wrong, taking names, being the winner. Okay. The winner is, hearts for Christ. Right. And so what I'm concerned about is souls. I'm concerned about people and their walk with Christ. And the concern I share with many others about the traditional creationist type of apologetic, a la Ken Ham and so forth, is that the individual that grows up on the material, and that's all they ever hear, and they're never challenged, and they never feel that challenge, they never really ask questions. Okay, well, maybe their faith is never going to waver. But what I do find is that they're not. Many people will find them intellectually dishonest when they really start to question them, and because they'll be turned on very quickly too for not simply just believing and having enough faith and so forth. There's all kinds of things that can be thrown at a person once they show any doubt. I think the new creationists have a sympathy for that. I think that they understand the difficulty that people have in their own minds and as they go through life, and they confront difficult questions, because most of the new creationists are very straightforward about these are hard questions. All right. And we also understand old Earth creationists aren't crazy for thinking the world is old. Yes, there are lots of things you can look at in the world, and it just kind of says the world is old, right? And we understand that, and you're not crazy for thinking that it could look that way or be that way. We don't think it is, because we think that God has not made it that way and told us so. But we know we have a long way to go to provide a comprehensive view that explains all the data and the observations of the world around us within the framework of a young Earth. All right, and the young Earth might incorporate aspects of appearance of age and so forth. There might be different ways to package that up. But nonetheless, the new creationists have a heart for Christ, for discussion, for interacting with those that are questioning, those that are seekers. All right. And they're not afraid of the world. They're not afraid of the data of the world. Every new thing that happens isn't something scary to them. It's something that's like, it's revealing, creation. And that's what I find really refreshing too, is I really enjoy science. I love learning new things. I love learning about creation. All right. I love learning about God's world. And I find it incredibly invigorating to discover brand new things. There's always something new to learn. That's what's awesome about creation, is it's so massive, right? From the size and scope of the universe to the intricacies of organisms. There's just a never-ending playing field for discovery and for learning new things. And I find there's that lack of enthusiasm. And I'm going to say, of course, there are some traditional creationists that just love certain aspects of science, but there are many of them that seem to, not take comfort in the wonders of the world, but almost like shrink from the world, and kind of just like recently on another live stream, I was discussing with another apologist the fact that they tend to just they're sort of trying to cut themselves off from the world. It's like there's no need to explore more. We don't need to know that much more about creation because we're just here to survive until the end times. All right, let's just get through this world. This world is decaying. This world is falling apart. This world is full of sin. This world is ready to go to the scrapyard. Okay, there's no redeeming this world, and therefore there's no real excitement about understanding God's word. Right? The only thing we try to understand the world for is to somehow make our own lives better, right? Technology or something like that. There's no just wonder, just absolute wonder about the world that way. So, okay, so I'm getting way off track. And okay, so back to so I'm trying to explain the differences between the new creationist and the more traditional creationism. So here's the thing. If somebody comes and they are exploring questions and they have questions about creation, right? And they've been brought up on younger creationist literature, and they find the new creationist literature, what they're going to find is they're going to find a sympathetic ear to yeah, I have real questions, and these people are really open to actually listening to my questions and trying to answer them. And when they don't quite have the answer, they're like, that's a really interesting question. I don't really fully understand it. And I understand if others that aren't young earth creationists look like they have a better answer. We hope to have that better answer someday. Help us, join us. We're going to figure this out. But it's so less off-putting than you just have to have enough faith, right? Here's the answer. Don't dare question, these things that we've been saying for a long time about radioactive decay or whatever, right? That there's no need to explore this further. We have the answer. There you go. Go on with your life. That leads to, for some people, that's fine. That's all they need. And they'll be happy. They'll never think about it again. There's a large percentage of people who actually have inquisitive minds. I mean, God has given us inquisitive minds. He's given us a desire to ask ourselves about who we are, where we come from. So all those really fundamental questions. And so I see the new creationists as a way station for people who are really struggling, and gives them some kind of hope and gives them the ability to discuss and talk and interact in ways that they couldn't through mainstream creationist literature, and gives them a chance to, I think, protect their walk, all right, rather than completely turn their back. And I'm, careful about using the word fall away. I mean fall away in the sense of if they're truly Christians, they're not going to have fallen away, because I'm a Calvinist and so on. But maybe they were never really had true faith, and young Earth creationism will very kind of quickly they'll discover that right in that pretty quickly. With the new creationists, I do see them. And this is the thing. Ken Ham is going to see them, and I know other traditional creationists. This is the way they view it. They view the new creationists as the slippery slope. All right, it's like you could start going down that direction. They're more willing to use evolutionary language, even though they don't believe that evolutionary biology is the explanation for the origin of all life and so forth. All right, but they still use more evolutionary language. They're more likely to interact with that language. They're more likely to be willing to discuss a variety of ideas without being as dogmatic. And so they are more comfortable, all right, to sort of live with if you have questions. Now, of course, once you get into that world and you start to really investigate and you're led to a framework of not just immediate rejection of all other ideas, like, okay, if you're not this type of creationist, then you are of the devil. All right. And so I don't want to go to the devil. Once you lose that, like there's a dichotomy and there's just two sides, and you're allowed to explore that space a little bit, all right, and have respect for older earth creationists and theistic evolutionists and intelligent designists and so forth, and say, like, there are valuable things I could learn from them. Once you have some level of respect and ability to discuss things with them and interact with their literature, well, then you're in danger of basically learning what I think are maybe better truths, right? Maybe a better way of understanding God's creation and integrating your science and your faith. And so, but you'll do that without like just absolutely casting away young earth creation, because I see that all the time. I see students who like brought up on only young earth creationist material, and then it's like they have no idea what to do when they actually see the same observations, but maybe some new things they were never told before, right? Because a lot of it's cherry-picked information in the traditional creationist world. And all of a sudden their eyes are like wide open and they feel like they've just completely been lied to, and they run away the other direction. All right. And those are the people I talk to a lot. Those are the people that send me emails and they're like, what am I going to do? And a lot of them are just belligerent. Like, it's just like, why even give them the time of day, because I'm just totally gone on it altogether. And I'm not willing to even consider anything, even Christian-like, after that. What I find is those who work with the new creationists, and they're the ones that are teaching in colleges. This is the thing that's scary, that I think scares Ken Ham and others. They're the ones that are actually teaching students in creation colleges and so forth, and they're raising the next generation of creationists to maybe have attitudes that are don't have the severe rhetoric that has become what traditional young earth creationism is. And I say become because I think over time it's just gotten more and more and more and more and more caustic in that environment. And so I think there really is real opportunities here to guide people through their walk, on this path of understanding science and faith and the interactions of science and faith. And the new creationists represent I think a stepping stone that kind of wasn't there very, as obvious as it was before, that helped people through that. I also see, it's the same way I kind of view intelligent design as well. I have big problems with some theological aspects of intelligent design. And I think people that get into intelligent design is a way to get out of young earth creationism. And it's like a convenient, maybe, way station for them. And some people might say progressive creationism as well. But, that's a way where they're starting to filter out information, and seeing it in a different way. And I see the new creationists as fulfilling that role. Now, they will not view it that way, and I know that they don't want that to be the case. However, I think that that's where their style of doing creation apologetics leads. And I think it's a good thing overall. I think they will create and make more creationists, young earth creationists. I really do. I really do. I think they will hold on to people who would have been lost from creationism, and they will hold on to them. They will also lose some people to young earth creationism because they will take other steps toward other viewpoints, and it won't be traumatic for them because of I think the environment that they've been put into with a new creationist. Could you get Gracie for me? I just realized that I'm still talking. I'm still recording, and I just didn't realize what time it was. It's already 7:50. Yeah, thanks. Hopefully I remember to cut this part out. So I guess a way of putting it is that I think of the new creation as being a kinder, gentler version of young earth creationism. So you might be saying to yourself, yeah, they're just absolutely wrong. I think they're totally wrong about everything. But I think you have to appreciate the fact that they have this different approach. And I think that that's better for the Christian church, right? It is what the Christian church needs. And I think that we can still have arguments about, and we should, because this is a very important topic, but we need to have them in a way that's more productive. And I think the new creationists allow for a somewhat more productive conversation to occur. And so I appreciate that aspect of it. So let me, before I quit here, so yeah, I started out this video saying that I was really frustrated because I just got done recording a long video about this. And I had gone off on a bunch of tangents. I didn't really like what I said before. And now I didn't even know I was going to say all this stuff. And this is better. So maybe this is a keeper. I don't know. We'll see. Version 3.0 or whatever the version this is. It's kind of hard to talk about these things. Okay, so this was I wanted to explain my cover slide for social media for the first blog post I published. Young Earth Creationism in 2021, the dawn of the new creationists, right? So now maybe this slide makes a little more sense after all the things that I've just talked about, all right? So if you don't recognize where this scene comes from, this is from near the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? Stanley Kubrick's magnus opus movie or film. And in that scene, this astronaut, all right, the spaceman has been dragged out to this planet, and what appears to be some kind of alien force or aliens have built this structure that he's now living in. He's actually lying in this bed, dying. And as he's lying in this bed, surrounded by this space that's been produced for him, he sees this monolith suddenly appears in the room. And, I think everybody knows this movie, right? The monolith or the obelisk is this structure that represents new information or a new evolution, all right? Some change, some sort of input, all right? It's sort of like, God reaching down, God or gods or whatever his vision is of who the powers of the universe are reaching down and providing some sort of new step in the evolution of this world, this universe. And that's portrayed early in the movie, right? Because you have these monkeys around there, and all of a sudden this thing shows up, and then suddenly it's not just their technology has changed, culturally they've changed, right? They become more aware, they become maybe conscious or something like that. And in some ways you could see it as like sin actually begins, at that point, right? Lots of biblical allusions in this movie. But toward the end of the movie, which this is the end of the movie, you then have man then being faced with this monolith again. And here then you have the space child, which is shown in the very last scene. It's sort of like the next step of evolution of man into maybe this more ethereal thing versus maybe a corporal thing. So lots of interpretations, again, like I said in the movie. So I meant this to be a provocative image, right? I said, young Earth creationism, and then you have the new creationists. It's like, whoa, the new creationists are this new step in the evolution of creationism, right? Which takes creationism to some new level. Will it take it to a new level? Now, that's overblown, because young Earth creationism is going to be young Earth creationism for the foreseeable future. Their core concepts, their core principles, their core convictions aren't going to change. What I've been trying to say as I've been babbling for the last 30 minutes is that the new creationists have a new attitude, a new approach, but they have some new ideas. But their core principles aren't really any different. But how they interact and how they approach it and how they will shape the minds of future generations, I think is somewhat different. And so I view them as transformative, a potentially transformative power, force within young Earth creationism. And that's why I use this symbol. I mean, that's why I thought of this. And then what I have represented in this room is, you've got these various, these are sort of symbols of a past time, right? Even though the spaceman is living in sort of the present 1970s, but in the present, he's sort of given this space in this room that's imagined as like this maybe ideal or wonderful world that represents his world, even though it's going to be transformed. All right, so that original traditional view is Answers in Genesis and ICR have on these little pedestals over here, right? And I have Whitcomb and Morris in the two chairs here. All right, those are two foundational features. Their book, The Genesis Flood, in the 1960s. And I have scriptural geologists. They have a seat in this room. They're from the 1800s and sort of represent some of the nascent views of some of flood geology and young earth creationism. And then I've got John Woodward as sort of a foundational element, all right? And John Woodward's from the 1700s, sort of like the original version of flood geology, or the original idea that all the fossils that found in the geological column could be explained by a massive flood that churned up the world and then preserved these organisms. And so I have, so that's what this image was supposed to sort of convey, was traditional creationism has been around. You might think of it as like a little bit stodgy, right? It's kind of like set in its ways, hasn't changed in a long time. And now, boom, the new creationist. And maybe they're infusing this space with new ideas and a new approach, a new evolution of young earth creationism. As I said, I mean, I'm purposely being provocative here, just to sort of tweak people a little bit. But I really do believe that that my prediction would be over the next 10 years that I think we will see greater inroads of the ideas and approaches of new creationism into the broader young earth creationist world. Now, how will that inroads occur? I don't think it will occur by conversion. It's not going to be the new creationists are going to convert other traditional creationists. That's just not how that's not how paradigm shifts happen. Right? We know that from a lot of different things. People don't just change their minds. In politics, we don't have politicians who suddenly have an epiphany and change their whole way of thinking. What has to happen is there's another generation that comes along that has different ideas and replaces them. And that's what I think is happening here. Now, the new creationists aren't brand new. Some of them have been around for a long time, and some of them have evolved themselves. So that in a way, they have been able to change some. But they're not going to change the established characters and individuals that are hard set in terms of at those big three creationist organizations, ICR, AIG, and Creation Ministries International. Their leadership and the individuals that work for them and their full-time ministry, and so therefore, in a way, their income and their livelihoods are based on the way those organizations function, and that gives them a certain amount of they're like the Titanic, right? It really can't move a whole lot. It can't shift directions very, very quickly. What has to happen to those organizations is leaders have to leave and be replaced with new blood that have significant differences. And of course, they're trying to replace their leadership with individuals that have very similar blood. In the case of Ken Ham, maybe very, very similar blood, right? ICR actually has gone through a significant change of leadership because they've left the Morrises, which have been a sort of overarching father figure there for a long time. Guliuza, I can never say his name, who I do think has some significantly different ideas than a lot of other younger creationists. And I think that's going to create some conflict, well, more conflict than there already is between young earth creationist organizations. So there is the potential for break aparts within the broader young earth creationist, traditional creationist organizations. But like I said before, their modus operandi, like how they function, how they generate funds, how they promote their materials, how they speak, how they interact with the man in the pew is still very, very similar, even if they might disagree about specific ideas or specific ways to understand science. The new creationists are a new form of a blood type. And like I said, I think their advantage is they're influencing the academic side, and it's the academic side that infuses new ideas. Again, you might object, and I say like, well, intellectually it's bankrupt anyway, so how can you infuse a new? No, I think that they really truly are thinkers that are critiquing, and they have the capacity to critique other creationists, whereas creationists in traditional organizations generally don't critique in nearly the same way or have the power, the ability to critique. Right? These are all, I have to emphasize, these are all generalities. Right? There are individuals within all these different areas that may be very good at some of these things and don't display the characteristics that I'm talking about. So I'm talking very generally, big overview of creationism here in terms of styles and types. All right, so where else should I go with this? Yeah, so young Earth creationism 2021. I think it's a somewhat changing landscape. I think the big three organizations still have a huge leg up, and they have a huge influence. They have all the money. They get all the donations. They are the face of young Earth creationism to the average person who picks up their young Earth creationist material at a conference. They're the ones that are going to be seen at conferences. They get the big speaking opportunities. They're generating homeschool materials, so that is influencing future generations. But the thinkers and the intellectuals and the people that really want to be and understand young Earth creationism are actually coming up through the new creationists, and they then will be the ones that influence the next generation. So sometimes just having all the money, having a big organization, having a fancy theme park is not enough to sustain an organization, sustain a particular culture. If you're not the one that's generating the groundswell and the root level new wave that could come up and crash upon you at some point. I don't know what will happen. There's a lot of different things that could happen within creationism that might push things one way or the other. But I'm at least encouraged by the new creationists, and I find them intellectually much more interesting than I find the traditional creationist. And that gives me some hope for the future of science and faith discussions. All right, let's call it quits here. Bring myself back on the video here. Yeah, so all right, that's that's a long rant about young Earth creationists. I don't know, rant's probably not the right word. That's a bunch of stuff off the top of my head that I've just been kind of thinking about, and I hope if you were piqued by my new creationist language, that you found this video and hopefully can kind of see like where I'm coming from, and maybe are overly offended by me trying to pigeonhole creationists into different groups. But I'll say this is my hypothesis. All right, so it's, test my hypothesis. Where am I completely bonkers about this, and where might I have some ideas? Maybe I have some ideas that are represent some strains that are occurring within young Earth creationists, and maybe it helps you think about the direction of creationism. And honestly, I hope that it helps some of the new creationists think about where they are at, and whether I think that they've thought about these things and they kind of have discussed this. But I might be wrong. Maybe they've never really thought about themselves as sort of coming together and coalescing into an almost a movement, something that doesn't necessarily have a name or a particular organization. Although I think the New Creation blog and Is Genesis History is forming a bit of a structure and an umbrella that these individuals can feel kind of comfortable with. And the ones I mentioned in the blog, by the way, are not the only new creationists. There's many others that I would classify and label as new creationists. I simply labeled them because they in a way call themselves the new creationists on the New Creation blog. And so that's why I labeled them that. But of course, some of them don't fit all of my profile of a new creationist, but I think as a group, they're generally in that crowd. Oh yeah, I know what I was saying now. I was saying I think the new creationists. I think someone will watch this. I will try to make sure they watch it, and I hope that you find it encouraging, maybe that we see your work as being important within creationism. I hope you're not discouraged by what I say about, like, I just think it's kind of a way station, and maybe some people will find their way through you to other interpretations of scripture and science. Um, but I do think you're doing more good, all right, overall than harm, and I don't have that feeling when I talk about other young Earth creationists at times. I feel like on balance, there's more harm done than good. And that's been one of my big struggles, and it's one of the things that gives me the incentive and desire to continue doing what I'm doing. And I'm encouraged and look forward to the next few years of finding out, how these discussions go, and how the interactions happen with among creationists. And for whoever watches this from Answers in Genesis, I hope that you see that as not simply, this is a danger to us, and it's just like, putting the walls around and saying, like, okay, now what can we do to slow down this impending force that's out there? Or maybe I never realized this is a big problem, and maybe it is. No, I hope you'll ask yourselves, what you could be doing differently in a positive way to um, uh, be a kinder and gentler and more Christian organization than I think you are now. Yeah, all right. I don't really know how to stop this because I kind of hate to end on that particular note. So I really don't want to end there. So how can I end this? I can say, well, thanks for listening. And what am I going to do next? I've got a whole bunch of projects going on right now, and I have a couple other interviews lined up. So maybe I'll find new ways to express what I've just expressed here. And I hope to get back to some other, just me talking about interesting science stories, because I haven't gotten to do that for a while. And then, of course, I have to learn genetics again because I need to teach that again in the fall. So thanks for listening. If anyone is still listening at this point, have a great day, time, night, morning, or whenever you're watching this. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.